Its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello everyone, I'd like to welcome all of you back to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host Mark Snyder, and I'll run down the list here of what we're going to do on the show for the next 2 hours. I'm going to spend the first 15 minutes or so talking about the spiritual consciousness versus the material consciousness, and I will, in the process of doing that, probably bring in a few of Billy's contacts. And I'll explain who Billy is in a moment. We're going to also talk about his book, The Might of Thoughts. We're going to talk about confidence, optimism, some important things I think we all need to tell ourselves, suffering, tangled ideas. Third part of the first hour, I'll talk about overpopulation and our forests. The fourth segment of the first hour, I will talk about creation. In the second hour, I have a guest coming on, Karrol Steeves. She runs the Colorado group that meets and studies the Meier material. We're going to talk a little bit about something she calls ray guard, which is something that's supposed to help block all these negative waves that are bouncing around the planet now. We're going to also talk about her trip to Machu Picchu and a few other things regarding the Meier material, including the book, The Way to Live. And if you've heard this show before, you know I spend a lot of time talking about the writings of Edward Albert Meier. He's an 81-year-old man. He lives in Switzerland in a tiny mountain village called Hinterschmidruti. Right around 1945, 1944, he started getting telepathic messages from a man named Spoth, an extraterrestrial human of about 1,000 years old, who was from a world called Era, a planet that's some 80 light years beyond our Pleiades in a star system called the Pleiadian star system. These extraterrestrials are not from our Pleiades, even though many people describe them as Pleiadians, and their ancestors, they say, are our ancestors. And our ancestors were a group of human beings from Lyra Vega who came to the Earth first time about 22 million years ago. They came again at about 389,000 years ago. The history of the Earth is very complicated and very convoluted, and not something that I'm going to talk about too much today. But Spoth started to send Edward Albert Meier these telepathic messages when Billy was living in Bulak, Switzerland, which is even farther north in Switzerland. And Billy was only about 5 years old when Spoth landed his silvery pear-shaped craft in a clearing near a field, and Billy was brought into the ship as if by ghostly hands, he would write later, and a couple different contact reports that he felt like he was lifted up by ghostly hands. And Spoth took Billy up into orbit and started to tell Billy about his previous lives. And this is where we get into the difference between the spiritual consciousness and the material consciousness. Spoth explained to Billy that he had been the people that we call Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Emmanuel, and Muhammad in his previous lives, and he had taught an teaching. Is a prefix in German, which means most ancient. And this ancient teaching is about how our universe really works and what the creational natural laws are. And Spoth explained to Billy that he would have a difficult life and people would try to kill him. There have been something like 20 attempts on Billy's life. He was told that even his closest friends would turn against him. His wife even turned against him. So Billy has had a very challenging and difficult life. At one point, Svath placed a device on Billy's head, not to mind control him, but to protect him from those who would try to invade his psyche and do harm to him. Also, this device woke up abilities that Billy had in previous lives. And again, Edward Albert Meier has been the people that we call Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Emmanuel, and Muhammad, among others. And Svath and Billy had a connection in a previous life. And that's one of the reasons Svath came to the earth during these 11 years when Billy was about 5 years old to when he was about 16 years old, to help him in his current lifetime, to help his material consciousness. So what is the difference between the material consciousness and the spiritual consciousness? Well, 21 days after the sperm fertilizes the egg, the universe, the universal consciousness, has a normal event that occurs. A process in our universe is that the 21st day that the embryo is alive, something called the Geist form in the German, the spirit form, enters into the child, comes out of the fine matter world, and enters into the middle of the brain of the child in an area called the superior colliculus. And the superior colliculus is what controls eye motions and hearing and sight and the integration of all these different senses. And this Geist form, the spirit form that every human being has, also brings with it the material consciousness, the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, the unconscious mind. Now, the material consciousness, each lifetime, is a clean slate. It's blank. There's really not much there. Now, in the subconscious are programmed all of the essence of the previous understanding. For example, the essence of what you knew or learned in your previous lives in terms of your sense of logic, your wisdom, your discernment, your sense of love, confidence, optimism. All these different essences have been programmed into the subconscious. And there are other things that are programmed into the subconscious too. The Meier material, I haven't really come across how deeply it goes into this. But I want to bring up an episode in Billy's life that shows this. You know, Billy, the first 11 years of his life, he met with Svath. Then when he was about 16 years old, he was told to go to the top of a hill in Switzerland. And this hill was a place where Billy often meditated and thought about what was happening, what was going on. And Billy was going to meet his next teacher there, a woman named Asket, a woman from the Tao universe. See, the Tao universe is some 46 trillion years old. It's our sister universe. And this woman was coming out of this other universe into our universe, again, to mentor Billy for the next 11 years. Well, Svath had connections with Billy's previous personality, and so did Asket. So here is Billy he's picked up in a robotic craft, and he's taken all the way to Jordan, which is in the Middle East. And he steps out of this robotic craft and he waits around for about a half an hour. And then listen to what happens here. And then I'll talk about this in relationship to the spiritual consciousness. It says here, "For me, it was actually a spectacle, which I will indeed never forget. This luminous and completely soundless object, which lit up the entire surroundings as bright as day and floated down to then quietly remain on its landing place. So this giant ship, Billy's been brought there by a robotic craft. He got out of the robotic craft. He's gone from Switzerland, a cold, snowy environment, to Jordan, a sandy, desert, hot environment. It's evening, and he just saw this gigantic thing come down to the earth. And it's a disc. And he says here, I waited for minutes because now something further would indeed have to happen. Yet the time elapsed and nothing happened. So I sat on a rock and waited for the thing that indeed still had to come. And I waited a full half hour before something finally happened. From behind the ship walked a figure which approached me within a few yards, while quite slowly the illumination from the ship dimmed and went out. Yet already after a few seconds the ship began to glow again with light and radiated somewhat like twilight. In the weak shine of this twilight I was able to doubtlessly identify the approaching figure as a female person, ask it, if my senses did not enormously deceive me. So this is Billy's mentor for the second 11 years of his life, this woman named Asket. But listen to what happens here. And he says, and the next actions and words spoken by the woman already confirmed my assumption. She approached me in a familiar way, and I suddenly perceived an enormous loving sympathy which somehow penetrated me in a peculiarly painful way. The perception was so familiar to me that it was able to cause painful feelings in me because I had indeed missed her in my earthly existence until now. So he's 16 years old, and he's had 11 years of contacts with an extraterrestrial named Spoth. He's brought from Switzerland to the Jordan in the Middle East, and he sees this giant disc land. This woman gets out, walks over to him, and he says, I indeed missed her in my earthly existence. He didn't know her. He had never met her in this lifetime ever before. But the spiritual consciousness, your spirit form, has knowledge from all your previous lives, and programmed into your subconscious is also other knowledge, sometimes called evolutive values. So Billy is feeling that he missed this person, even though he, in this lifetime, never met her. This is very, very interesting. We'll talk about this a little bit more. And here, let me read a little bit more. It says, Asket's somewhat peculiar greeting ceremony struck me as strangely familiar and known. So, again, the subconscious here is picking up bits and pieces of this. And yet, to the best of my will, I was unable to find out why she seemed so familiar and known to me. With a later question regarding this, Asket only smiled and explained that I should consider my other personalities in earlier lives before the current one. So the Meier material explains that our spirit form, it's called the Geist form in the German, is probably around 4.5 million years old, typical Earth humans. Now, according to Meier information, Billy, his spiritual consciousness is extremely ancient. I think it's 9.6 billion years old. His connection with Spoth, he was Spoth's teacher in a previous life, and he was a man called Nocodamian. Now, how he knew Asket in his previous personality, I do not know. It's probably somewhere in the Meier material in all of this. So you have a spirit form. It's called a Teilstock in the German. It's a fragment of the universal consciousness. It's very, very ancient. And Billy's second or third contact, a woman named Semyase, explained that. She said that everyone has a spirit. Every human has a spirit. And it never dies, and it never sleeps, and it records everything that you do. And it will tell you if your thinking is right or wrong if you've learned to pay attention to it. Now, it doesn't go into any more detail. I have not read anywhere where it goes into any more detail than that. But over the years of trying to figure out how my spirit form is telling me if something is right or wrong, I've looked inward, and this is my speculation. I know from the teaching also that the spirit form impulses the material consciousness. So we get these signals from the spiritual consciousness. They're impulses. And I think what happens is when we've done something or we've said something, sometimes we'll get an impulse, probably most of the time, and that impulse may start an unconscious thought, a subconscious thought, but at some point in this whole process, we'll get a feeling. The feeling grows out of the thoughts. It's another principle from the Meier material. And that feeling will be uncomfortable if you've done something that isn't neutral positive. Okay, that's another teaching in the Meier case, is that we always want to keep our thoughts in what's called neutral positive balance, because that's the way that the universe works. And that's the way, because out of the thoughts grow the feelings, out of the feelings come the habits, and out of the thoughts and the feelings and the habits come the circumstances of your life. Now, if your thinking is right, if it's neutral positive, not too positive and not too negative, and it shouldn't be negative at all, then you will make yourself one step closer to having positive events. So let me kind of explain this a little bit, if I can, in a little more detail. So in this book called The Might of Thoughts, Billy explains certain concepts. One is confidence. He explains that we should be confident. And this is one of the things, this is the spiritual teaching in the Meier case. One of the things that Svath told Billy is the importance of confidence. He said, Svath told Billy, you must build up great confidence for all your future and for all the success of your work, your tasks, your jobs, your mission, and always know that you will accomplish everything and never fail. So that takes confidence. And much of our negative thinking comes from a lack of confidence, from self-doubt and anxiety. You know, I can even remember a short time ago when I was still plagued by self-doubt. And one of the things you can do is to just tell yourself, I am, and I call these the I ams, I guess, I am confident. And this will break the cycle of negative thinking. We have to gain control of our anxiety. And one of the things that Billy explains is, if you don't control your anxiety, it will control you. So the anxiety, how do you control the anxiety? You have to do it by the intellect. And tell yourself, I am confident. Confident means that you trust your own abilities, your own qualities, your own judgment. And this will give you a feeling of self-assurance. And is really a good feeling when you start to get self-assurance. And you have an appreciation of your own abilities and your own qualities. So the term confidence means you have this feeling of self-assurance. Let me also read what Svath told Billy in regards to confidence here. He says, and only if you maintain the correctness of your thoughts and feelings as well as of your work and your actions in every respect, and also use your great powers of consciousness in this form, and you will be able to have true confidence in yourself and not allow yourself to be shaken by anything. So again, and Svath goes on about the importance of confidence. And I think it's the thing that always occurs first is we lose our confidence. Self-doubt comes in. And so we've got to learn tools to fight this war, because one thing that you'll learn as you do this more, if you adopt this, is you'll find you'll have more and more control of your life. You'll have more and more confidence. Confidence will start to be a natural thing. Therefore, acquire confidence in the certainty that you will always maintain control, and whereby you shall not, however, behave in a way which does not correspond to your nature. So that's the first step, confidence, I wanted to talk about. The second thing, after you've told yourself, I am confident, tell yourself you're optimistic. Now, what is optimism? And it says on the Might of Thoughts, page 216, that optimism is a prerequisite for constancy in life. In other words, to have consistency in your life, to have a routine, to have a set of circumstances which are stable, requires, if you have optimism, in other words, if you're optimistic, it will create stability. Let me continue. If the human being is capable of dealing with the often very hard facts, situations, and circumstances, and so forth, of his existence in a creative and constructive, kind, and wise, and thereby not losing his or her conviction about a good end. So, if you're optimistic, despite your difficulties that you're facing, you're always having, okay, this will have a good end. So let me continue here for these about a dozen things that you can tell yourself when you feel negative thoughts come in. And negative thoughts do creep in, especially because we're programmed for negative thoughts. And I heard somewhere that the typical human being has about 10,000 negative thoughts per day, which is ghastly. I hope that's an exaggeration. But I know I've had days where I've had like a continual stream of negative thoughts, because that's called tangled ideas. When you get tangled ideas, it's because you've got some notion in your head, an idea, which hasn't been completely thought through. And you've got a wrong notion, got a tangled idea, and now you've got confusion. And this thought keeps coming back, keeps coming back, because you're confused about it. Now the material consciousness says, no, I'm right, I got it right. No, you're confused about some aspect. So this keeps returning to your consciousness. And if this keeps coming over and over and over again, you can literally drive yourself into psychosis. So if you learn these things, then you'll know what to fight this battle with. So if you have a negative thought it's like a weed sprouting in your garden over and over and over again, tell yourself, I'm confident, I'm optimistic, I'm cheerful, I'm relaxed, I'm enthusiastic, I'm thankful, I am in harmony, I persist, I persevere, I endure, I am calm, I am satisfied. And you can tell I've memorized some things from the Meier material, and I recommend you do that. And Billy goes on in the Might of Thoughts to write, I am the master of my own destiny, the forger of my own fortune, the creator of my own good luck. I do not allow my thoughts to drift. I steer my thoughts like a captain steers his ship. It is the nature of the thoughts that by their might alone, every conceivable thing can be brought into fruition. And the universal creation law says, it's the might of the thought. Thoughts that are enlivened by might and power will have an effect. And that effect is directly proportional to the might and the power of the thought. So if you have a very intense negative thought, you were going to have bad results, very intense bad results. If you have a very intense neutral positive thought, then you can have success, you can have prosperity, you can have a lot of different things. So what we need to do is rewrite our subconscious programming. And we need to program the subconscious mind through repetition, because the subconscious mind has absorbed wrong ideas that come from your parents, from your family, from teachers, from society. And now we have a generation of people that are coming up out of the universities, because now the universities are programming people with wrong ideas. They're programming them that they're victims. They're programming the whole conflict between the sexes. They're programming the whole conflict between the races. And all of this is nonsense, because generally people in this country get along. The races get along. The difference between the sexes is not a big deal. This is, and again, this is a bit off on a tangent here. The deep state is what Billy calls the secret dark order. And there's some very negative people on the earth today that are trying to control everything. And they've got all the money and they've got all the power, and they keep sowing seeds of dissension in this country. And it's set up to end in the Civil War in America. 2 civil wars prophesied about the Meier material are coming to the United States unless we can correct our thinking. And it says in the Might of Thoughts that we are ill in our consciousness. And this is so evident today. There are so many people that literally are not coping with reality. So we have to learn how to control our thoughts. And confidence and optimism is one of the best way to do that. You have to program your subconscious. You're writing over your hard drive, writing over positive thoughts to write over all that negative that's been programmed. Now, I want to talk quickly, hopefully I can here, about suffering a little bit. And suffering, as a rule, is an effect of wrong thinking, especially when it's related to things that are going wrong, negative occurrences. So if you've got suffering in your life, it's an indication that you have ignored something called the law of harmony. There's a creational natural law called the law of harmony. And this law of harmony says you have to have neutral positive balance in your thoughts. And if you disregard that, for example, suffering as a rule is an effect of wrong thinking. And incidents of suffering are indicators that you've disregarded this law of harmony and you've decided to react against something. So let me read something from page 158. It says, The Might of Thoughts, page 158 says, a Sartung, which is a German word, enslaves himself or herself and confines himself or herself to a self-created imprisonment. I was talking about that rotating negative thought. Well, that's a self-created imprisonment from wrong thinking. But if you can correct your thoughts, if you can take control back, then you can think of peace, love, joy, freedom, harmony, and you will bring abundance into your life. So do not allow your thoughts to drift. Steer your thoughts like a captain steers his ship. Now, we also have unconscious thoughts and subconscious thoughts. The subconscious mind or the preconscious mind also has its own thoughts. So be aware of thoughts that can just jump out of seemingly nowhere. And that's a lot of times is because of unconscious thoughts. Now I'm going to change topic a little bit. Maybe I can come back to the mind of thoughts in a minute, because I did skip a couple of things there. But I want to talk about overpopulation. And this is, again, we were talking about thinking and wrong thinking. And you can relate this probably to wrong thinking in a lot of ways, overpopulation. Because there's a point of view that's been made very popular today that is very, very deceptive. And it's very, very, and I can see I need to put this in my notes. People today talk about fitting. First, they say we have 7 billion people in the world, and I think it's closer to 9 billion. And they say you could fit all these people in the several hundred square miles in the state of Texas, and that's true. But when you start thinking about feeding all these people, you start running into problems. And let me scale this down a little bit to make this a little easier to understand. If you have a 2,000 square foot house and you give 10 square feet to every person, you can fit 200 people in that house. 200 times 10 is 2,000. 200 people times 10 square feet, 10 square feet section for each person. That comes up to 200 people. You could, in theory, mathematically, it is true. You can't have any furniture in the house, but you can put people, 200 people, shoulder to shoulder, and give them each 10 square feet, and mathematically it works out. And in this scale down situation, it's very, very easy to see how absurd that point of view is. How this idea of taking, people come to the conclusion there is no overpopulation problem because they only look at the space in an isolated situation. See, this kind of thinking says, well, you can fit 200 people in a 2,000 square foot house. And obviously that's going to destroy your house. It's going to destroy your plumbing. It's going to destroy everything in that house in a very, very short time. And that's what happens on a planet when you have a runaway population. Right now there's about 9 billion people. Let's say there's 7 billion. Let's say we give each one of these 7 billion people one cow they eat for their whole lifetime. We're going to say everybody's going to be given meat in this whole, we got a world government now, let's say. And everybody gets one cow to eat their whole lifetime. And we're going to give these cows 2 acres. In other words, we will have 2 acres per cow, and that way they can graze on grass and they can be healthy cows. By the way, there's, I believe it's either Ireland or Scotland, maybe it was Scotland, that has some more cases of mad cow disease. And part of the mad cow disease problem is that we are having this problem already, and we cram a lot more than a single cow per 2 acres. We cram a lot more cows together, and this causes these diseases. And the Meier material talks about these diseases that are coming because we're not following these creational natural laws. You know, you can do things. You can cram 10 cows per acre, but if you've ever seen that, there's when I drive to Columbus every day, I see a farm that probably has a situation like that, and what happens is the field is devastated, and it's just a big mud field that these 15 or 20 cows are living in. And the farmer has to bring in food from the outside because the cows, there's nothing for the cows to graze on. And that's what happens if you don't follow this rule of thumb, 2 acres per cow, you destroy the field. And it was encouraging this year because a lot of the grass had grown back because he had kind of moved the cows to another location, and then now they're kind of back in, and they're doing a lot of damage. But so we have this rule of thumb about 2 acres per cow. Now, if we had 7 billion cows, a cow for each person to eat during their whole lifetime, and we gave those 7 billion cows, each cow gets 2 acres. That would be 14 billion acres, which is about 21 million square miles. So you can see that those 7 billion people crammed into Texas, if we gave them meat, if we allowed them all to be beef eaters, it would take 21 million square miles to raise those cows in a healthy way, where we wouldn't have to be worried about mad cow disease and things like that. Now, the thing of it is, today, we are doing so many things that are unhealthy. We're using pesticides and herbicides, and we have too many cows crammed into a small area. The same thing with chickens. So we have all of these weird diseases that are starting to pop up. This is going to get worse as our population continues to rise. And just a few little points. One cow, you can get about 500 pounds of meat from a typical cow. And if someone lives 100 years and eats 5 pounds of meat per cow, or per year, so they live 100 years, they eat 5 pounds of meat per year, then that'll come out to a single cow. But it's very possible for someone to eat 2 pounds of beef per week. So you could see that if you ate 2 pounds of beef per week times 52 weeks in a year times 52 weeks in a year, 2 pounds of beef times 52 weeks in a year times 100 for the number of years, somebody could eat as much as that's an incredible amount of pounds of beef that you could eat. You could literally, if you do the math, I won't bore you with all the math, but a person could easily eat 20 cows in a 100-year lifetime if they were a true beef eater. So this whole overpopulation thing has been simplified to the point where people have drawn grossly wrong conclusions. And in the next few minutes, I'm just going to rattle off a few of the disasters that have occurred related to overpopulation and such things. For example, the Meier material talks about prophecies. The Henoch prophecies talk about hurricanes which will rage over the United States and fires. And we've seen in 2013 the Rim Fire, which burned 402 square miles. The Rim Fire, it was a gigantic fire that it burned in Northern California, and it was the third largest fire in California history at that time. Almost burned down the Yosemite National Park sequoia trees. Now, I've been a little irresponsible this year, and I haven't been covering the fires because it's just so depressing to me that it's hard for me to. There was in 2013 something called the Pony Complex Fire, which was 150,000 acres burned. We also had the Funny River Fire in Alaska, 200,000 acres burned. The Carlton Complex Fire in 2014 was the largest fire in Washington state history. with 250,000 acres burned. The biggest fire is the Fort McMurray fire in Canada, 1.5 million acres. These are record-setting fires. I hear people say, "Oh, we always have fires every year. There's no problem. The earth is healthy. Everything's great." Well, these are like the storms we're having, for example. The fires are record-setting fires. For Washington State, the biggest fire in the history of California occurred this year. I don't even know the name of it off the top of my head. The Fort McMurray wildfire, 1.5 million acres destroyed in 2016. We've had these gigantic hurricanes like Hurricane Harvey, Hurricane Irma, Hurricane Maria. They have devastated much of Puerto Rico and the United States. I just want to fire through a little bit quickly about overpopulation. Right now there is a caravan of migrants coming in from Mexico. And the Mexican authorities are trying to stop them from coming into the United States. I don't know if you've seen this on the news yet. I haven't been watching it the way I should. But there are literally tens of thousands of people in a stream coming into the United States. So it'll be interesting. It's like an invasion taking place. And I remember Frosty Wooldridge, which I'm going to try to have come back on the show to talk about overpopulation, said that we're having 100,000 people per year coming into the United States, which is, I didn't believe him. He has these, I didn't believe him. I thought it was, that, but it's true. We have 9,000 births per hour. 9,000 newborns per hour. That's unbelievable. 18 million people are starving to death every year. 4 million people are born on the street and die on the street in India. And that's supposed to be an advancing country. It's incredible. A country like Bangladesh, a country the size of Iowa, has a population of 167 million, which is more people than live in Russia. Bangladesh is only the size of Iowa. The world population is growing by 77 million people annually. And the United States is the third fastest growing country in the world because of immigration. I think my guest is standing by, so I'm going to see if I can pull her in if she's ready to roll. I don't think I think she's, well, maybe she is ready. Okay, I'm going to pull her in a little early. I'll try to. Let me see if I can do this. I don't do this enough. Oh, here we go. Yeah. So this is Karrol Steeves. She runs the study in Colorado. There's a group that meets and studies the Meier material. Karrol, how are you?
I'm great. How are you, Mark?
Pretty good. I was just talking about overpopulation, but I don't think we're going to talk about that with you. And you're standing by. I thought I would just drag you on in so you don't have to sit there and wait. We'll go for another 15 minutes, and then I think we'll hear a break for 5 minutes and the music will play, and then you can be on the whole hour, the second hour. And I kind of talked about the beginning of the show. I introduced what you would be discussing. And one of the things that we wanted to talk about were these ray guard things that you do with your business. I put this back on. I haven't wore this in a while, like a week or two for some reason. And I was really energized today. I don't know if that was because of this device. Do you want to tell people a little bit about your business and what these things are all about?
Sure. They're a device that was developed, actually several devices that were developed about 20 years ago in Switzerland in response to the growing EMF situation with cell phone towers and wireless devices. And an engineer, I think he has an engineering background. His name is Günter Gasser in Austria, and I think in conjunction with maybe a few other people, understood from research, and they also call it ancient technology, using minerals to absorb EMF radiation. And so from what I understand, the smaller the crystal, the higher the frequency it will. So these are piezoelectric crystals. It's a mixture of piezoelectric crystals and ceramic, some kind of patented ceramic material that's like a powder, and it's proprietary. So I don't know the exact, of course, formulation. I know they use 39 different minerals and ceramic mixture. The piezoelectric crystals actually react to what are in essence sound waves. They're pressure waves, and
really?
so they cause the crystals to vibrate.
Is that right?
Yeah, and in fact, that's how the old crystal radios worked. That I don't know if you remember those back in the 50s.
So, are you saying that this little thing that you gave me here, it has crystal in it that's vibrating?
Yeah, it has a crystal, different rare earth minerals, crystals, a mixture, and those crystals actually vibrate and they create heat. And that's why the little case that it's in, if you look at it closely, the glass tubes holding the crystals are suspended in there. If you notice, it's not really touching the edges. There's space around it.
Okay.
And that space is there to allow the heat to build up and dissipate.
Okay.
And I've never really noticed the heat.
I haven't either. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very subtle, and I know that in the larger devices, which are shaped like domes and like cones, it's the same principle. There's a big receiver inside, and that space is inside to allow that vibration to occur and the heat to build up and to dissipate. As the longitudinal waves are transmuted into more biocompatible waves. That's my understanding.
Sorry to interrupt you. I want to come back. I got some more questions. I just got an urgent message from one of my listeners. Have you heard about the caravan that's coming in from Mexico? Have you heard about tens of thousands of people are now streaming into our country from Mexico? This is just breaking. Have you heard?
I actually heard a few days ago on a podcast I was listening to a warning about that.
Well, a listener here says urgent President Trump briefing on military at border, talks about the caravan, says he will use military to stop them. Wow. Okay. Just a side tangent.
No, it's all right. I didn't get to listen to the whole podcast, and this is a show that I listen to once in a while just to see what they're saying, because they say things about Colorado a lot, but a lot of it hasn't happened, so I take it with a grain of salt. But, I wait to see, whether anything. This is the first thing I've heard from them that's actually, a few things. One of the few things I've heard that actually sounds like it's happening.
Oh, boy. Yeah, I was talking about overpopulation before you came on. Now, this device that you're talking about that I have on right now, it was developed in Switzerland?
Yes.
And what was that engineer's name again? Do you remember?
His name is, it's Günter Gasser. And that's the name of the company, actually, that produces that ray guard. It's Günter Gasser GmbH. And they're located, their main office is in Austria. So some of the products are produced in Austria and some are produced in Switzerland. The majority, I think, are produced in Switzerland because some of the products are made also with wood. We have home devices that are handmade out of pine. And then the receiver, like the one in your necklace, only much larger, is inside that. And so it's a family company. small company that employs their own family members, and they've been making them for 20 years. And as things have gotten more and more radiation has, being developed from these devices, is being emanated from these devices, as we have more and more of them, they're making them stronger. They've slowly made them stronger over the years. And recently they came out with, they had a mobile device. It looks like a mobile. You carry it in your pocket, and it has a 6-foot spherical radius around the body. And they had one that was not on the market, but you could buy it through referral. And it was they originally developed it for someone who's being targeted by microwaves in Tunisia.
Oh my God.
And so now after doing some further testing on their own, they've realized that they needed to release it to the general population because of the 5G issue. And it's not that the other devices don't protect you; they do, and there's been some confusion about that. And I really wanted to speak to that. I'm glad you're giving me the opportunity to clear this up. The other devices still protect you, but there are some people that are much more sensitive. They're also in professions or living in areas where there's a lot more electrosmog. And Such a
depressing topic, isn't it? I mean, we're being killed. We're being killed. I mean, this is so crazy. I wanted to, I don't know if you know this, but my understanding is Switzerland does not have telephone wires suspended from poles or towers. I think they're all buried. They're way in front of us. They're way ahead of us, aren't they?
Well, actually, I didn't know that. That may be true. Now that I think back, I don't know that I noticed any. That was probably why things look so pristine and orderly. But, they have a lot of electrosmog.
Well, they do.
They do. And they have a lot of cell phone towers and wireless, and it's getting worse. In fact, Christian Frenner was telling me that there was a small town in Switzerland that they were going to put 5G in the church tower, and the people got together and stopped it.
Oh, good.
And as I said to him, that's great to hear, but that's temporary. And he said, he agreed with me. He said, yeah, it's only a matter of time. They'll end up distracting them. They'll get distracted with something else. And as soon as the telecommunications industry sees an opening, they will put it in. And there's a lot of people who don't understand or don't think that this EMF radiation is harmful. Yet, all you have to do is follow the money. The largest gap insurance companies, Swiss Re, and oh boy, the other one slipped my mind. Hang on, it's Lloyd's of London will not. They will not insure the telecommunications companies.
Really?
So the telecommunication companies are actually self-insured because no one will insure them, not even the high-risk companies.
Oh my goodness.
That says a lot.
Let me reel you back a little bit so people don't get lost here. You mentioned Christian. Could you tell people a little bit who that is?
Oh, sure. Christian Frenner is a core group member with FIGU, which is part of the Billy Meier mission, located in Hinterschmidt-Rüti, Switzerland.
Hey, you pronounce that pretty well. I'm impressed.
Well, that's because I would say where we were going to people in Switzerland, and they'd look at me and they would correct me, and I was like, oh, okay.
Really?
my emphasis was so bad that they didn't even know what I was saying at first, and they lived in the area.
That's funny.
That's why I pronounce it well. So anyway, he and I were having a conversation about these electrosmog situations, because there's been many discussions about this problem and within the contact nodes, and there are scientists all over the world there's a group of scientists that have petitioned the UN with an appeal to stop the rollout of 5G until research is done, because we're a part of the largest biological experiment in history.
Oh, it's insane. I went to lunch with a couple of guys I work with, and the guy that drove has one of these incredible big GM trucks, and he, in his office in the building we're working in, which is on the 6th floor, presses something, I guess, on his cell phone, which sends a message to a satellite, which starts up his car. That was sitting out in the parking lot. And then once we got onto his car, he had. Have you heard of Alexa? Which is you can talk to it. It's like artificial intelligence. And we were talking about. I told him. I said, I don't have wireless in my house. I've been scared to have it put in. I just think we shouldn't be bathed in it. And he says, "Oh, you're bathed in it anyway." But I don't think. I think we must try to do what we can do, right?
Yeah, I say yes, resist when possible. This technology, don't wear the wireless devices on your body, like Apple Watches and those sorts of things. I mean, there are some really ludicrous things that are being developed, and it's like, just because we can doesn't mean we shouldn't. Like, for instance, there's actually a pacifier, a wireless pacifier.
There's the music. We'll be back in 5 minutes. Take a break.
Right.
Be right back.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Travels to Earth through the rainbow crystal bubbles from the furthest reaches of space and time, across the dimensions, through the elements, and in harmony with the colors of the universe. Through her mastery of abstract stream of consciousness malapropisms, she weaves a web of comic, satiric, cosmic conversation. Her subjects can range from Norman, the goose next door, to astrology and earth changes, and into the deep recesses of the soul matrix. She holds a wealth of knowledge on herbs, plants, and astrology. Join Mona and her guests on adventures of a feral hippie as she touches the earthly radio waves 5 days a week at 2 p.m. Monday to Friday on Studio B at Revolution Radio.
Transcending time and space, let us take you to the place inside your mind where thoughts divide and mysteries unwind. Join us every Monday evening right here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And you will catch the Fenton Perspective with our great host, Lorian Fenton. Come listen in as she shares her amazing stories from the past to present, along with all of her guest secrets to the future. That's the Fenton Perspective every Monday evening right here from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, only on Revolution Radio. Oh, and you don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Who are we? Where do we come from? Are you curious about the origins of the human race? Join me, Gavin McCall, and a variety of guests on Ancient Humans, where we decipher world events, explore scientific theories, personal stories, myths, mysteries, and lore about the history of the human race.
Hi everybody, it's me, the Fedge, host of Inside the Eye Live. Before the Sunday mainstream media political pundit talk shows, there's Inside the Eye Live, where we break down some of the weekly mainstream media talking points before the talking points even get aired. Add in some entertaining stories, weather, cats, intriguing and informative guests, and you get one of the most listened to Saturday morning streaming media political talk shows going today. And it's all right here on our flagship station, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. So join me, the Fetch, for Inside the Eye Live every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern. It is truly intelligent media for the politically aware.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you back to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snyder. I spent the first hour talking about the spiritual consciousness versus the material consciousness. We also discussed some important things from the book, The Might of Thoughts, discussed a little bit about confidence and optimism and how to avoid suffering. You know, as a rule, much of our suffering comes from wrong thinking. And as a society now, we have a kind of wrong thinking that's so absurd that we're starting to create technologies that are literally killing us. And I've got Karrol Steeves on as a guest. And I think before we went to the break, she was talking about a wireless pacifier. Karrol, is that true?
Yes, it's a pacifier that can be used to monitor your baby's temperature.
Oh boy! Now, what else does it do to your kid?
It disrupts the cells in the body. It creates oxidative stress. So that's what wireless and cell phone radiation does. It's chaotic, and so it's putting stress on that little body. When there's simpler ways to, the old time-tested ways to read a temperature, that's not necessary to use something that sophisticated. And
we've always got to do what's cool, It's like it's
yes,
the latest, greatest thing. We never stop and think, like, maybe this is bad. Maybe there's some bad effects. They don't even talk about that.
Yes, and the wireless signals, they cause a permeation of the blood-brain barrier. So they know that, of course, then that lets in heavy metals. And so it causes a whole host of neurological problems, including dementia and autism. And yet, the irony is one of the other devices I saw, actually, you put it on a senior to monitor their Alzheimer's. So this is not the only thing, of course, that's causing dementia and autism, but it's adding to it.
Oh boy. Who are the evil people that are behind the 5G? Do you think it's just greed, or is there something diabolical here?
Well, that's a good question, because I think it might be a little bit of both. Mm-hmm. I might mostly be greed, but also there is the added benefit that they're using it to control our brain waves. I mean, there's proof out there. All you have to do is look online, and there's patent out there that that was issued for controlling the human nervous system through computer monitors. And all you have to do is Google that, and you can find the patent for that.
Really?
Yes. Yeah, it's right out there in plain sight. All you have to do is look for it. And, look at the weapons they've developed with the same technology. And they also, can use 5G to map the inside of your home.
That's weird.
Yeah, it is. So, I think they're using it for control, because that seems to be the ultimate name of the game. It's control, yes.
I think the owner of the station wants to chime in. Yeah, go ahead. Nighthawk, how are you?
Hey, how you doing?
Great.
I'm actually having this argument on Facebook about 5G right now. And, I'm a radio guy, not just internet radio, but I'm also a ham radio operator and have been working with, I have friends that actually designed the initial and first wireless networking protocol. But what seems to be the problem is there's this internet myth running around that 5G stands for like 5 gigahertz, and it doesn't. It's generation. The G stands for generation. It's like 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G. It stands for generation.
Exactly.
And, and the big problem with 5G, and it's not everywhere, it's very clustered in deep pockets of the cities, and it's complete oversaturation. Now, RF is dangerous and it is bad for you at any level. I mean, so, it's like, I'm sitting here at my desk and I have this, I'm one of those weird people that still has a landline.
Yeah, I do.
But
yeah.
I have a cordless phone hooked to it that's 2.4 gigahertz, which is actually the resonance of water. So, and it's like your cell phone does the same thing. It used to be, the cell phone used to be at 800 megahertz. That's way down. So the problem is not, I don't think 5G is, the thing with 5G is it's not a frequency, which so many people think, and it needs to be explained explicitly. 5G is not the frequency. It's not 5 gigahertz. It's the generation, and it's the oversaturation of all this intense RF that operates literally at the frequency of water, which is what most of your body is made of. Does that make sense to anybody?
So are you of the mind that 5G is dangerous, or do you think it's going to be all right?
Well, it's an oversaturation of RF. Mm-hmm. I got an RF burn one time, working on an antenna, and we keyed it up and it hit my hand.
Wow.
When we were working on an antenna, and I ended up growing a thumbnail out of the side of my thumb.
Are you
that
serious?
I had to have surgically removed. RF is radiation. It's radio frequency.
No kidding. You had another thumbnail that was growing out the side of your thumb?
It was growing out of the side of my thumb where I got burnt by RF.
Just that quick? It affected your DNA, maybe?
No, what it did is it hit the side of my thumb, 1,000 watts of radio frequency output from a radio, a linear amplifier is what it was. I was mounting an antenna and I said, "Hey, is it ready?" And somebody keyed the mic and it hit my hand and it burned a little pinhole through my thumb. And then about 2 months later, I had a thumbnail growing out of the side of my thumb.
That is so weird. Oh, man. It's freaky, isn't it? Come on. What are we doing to ourselves with this stuff?
So anyway, we're since what? Early 1900s, radio, RF has been hitting us. And now, as far as I'm concerned, the big problem with the 5G and the way it's supposed to be, and it's not, the only place 5G is deep in the cities, because they're putting these antennas like every 15 feet for some reason.
Wow.
The Gwyn towers and all these little pineapple towers and all this stuff deep in the cities for this wireless stuff. And that's where the problem comes in. It's not that it's 5G. It's just saturating everybody with RF.
Do you think we're going to see like cancers and illnesses from this in the cities where it's
Well, we already are. We already have been. We have been for years.
Okay.
Exactly.
Karrol, do you have any thoughts on the additional thumbnail that you're at?
Oh, that's bizarre, but it doesn't surprise me because, our cells communicate with each other, and these frequencies interrupt that and disrupt them. So that's why you have tumor growths and, like I said, the blood-brain barrier permeations and, all kinds of issues from this. And from what I understand, 5G, means fifth generation. It's kind of a misleading, like they're only going up one level or something. But it's more like 15, should we say more like 15 to 30G from what I understand from the research I've done. And the waves are smaller, they're milliwaves, and it's harder for them to penetrate buildings, and they go shorter distances, so they need more, but they're very fast, and they need more of them. And that's why we're being saturated. They're putting them every 15 feet because they just don't travel as far as the 4G, from my understanding.
Well, yeah, the big point is, that it's all about the money as far as I'm concerned. That's why I live on the top of a mountain in the middle of ass nowhere. I'll never see 5G. We have not even gotten 2G here, and my cell phone doesn't work in the house. Mm-hmm. I literally have to go out in the yard and touch a tree. Literally touch a tree.
Wow. That's wild. You're in Kentucky?
Yeah, middle of it.
Yeah.
But that's why I came here.
Oh, sure.
Well, what they're doing is to ensure complete coverage. And I have articles that support this. They're putting Wi-Fi on the bottom of planes because there's so many airplanes flying over in the airspace. They're actually using airplanes so that people have access wherever they're at. Recently here, there was some weather balloons that were put up for the same reason. It was an experiment. People thought they were UFOs, and so it was in the news. And it was actually balloons that they were floating over the Drake, Colorado area, which isn't very far from me, that had 5G, or not 5G, and specifically not 5G, but wireless.
That was Google, right?
It might have been. I don't know who did it, but
it seemed like it was Google that did that. I'm sorry to invade your show, Mark, but this has been a topic that has been a great interest to me, because a lot of people seem to want to stick some mythology into this.
So exactly what is the mythology? It's not 5 gigahertz. It's fifth generation. Is that the mythology?
Yeah, that's the mythology, but okay. It's 5 gigahertz. It's like we're approaching the frequency of light. I mean, actually that is in the frequency of light. But anyway, I wanted to hear your guest finish your thought. I didn't mean to interrupt. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. That's all right. So what I was saying, they're also using drones for the same reason, because their ultimate goal, now I don't know if they'll achieve this, but their ultimate goal is coverage everywhere. Like you said, saturated.
Yeah, complete and total saturation.
Yeah, and there's a town in the UK called, you can actually look this up on YouTube. There's a guy named Mark Steele. I think he goes under Mark Anthony. And my attention was brought to this community, Gateshead, where they were putting LED lights up in the small antennas, and the citizens of the town started complaining about nosebleeds, joint aches, sleeplessness, depression, nausea, dizziness, burning sensations. And so this community has been, people in this community, particularly this Mark Steele, has been trying to have it removed, but of course, that's not going to happen. He thought they were going to have it removed in a few months. But so conditions that were taking years to develop, once they put these new antennas up, were happening in months.
Where was this?
You know, here's a really good example. We had a cell tower go up here about 5 years ago that I had to file 7 complaints to get them to turn it down. Because I could even show you, Google Map pictures of it, that it was literally creating kind of crop circles around the tower. But also my toaster, I could hear people talking in it.
Oh my God.
I thought it was insane.
Wow.
Because the power was so high that the RF was leaking into the electronics of my house.
Oh my gosh. That's got to be terrible. Oh.
And that's the problem with smart meters also. Those pulses of energy, they're causing those.
Okay, hold on. Yeah. Smart meters. All right. I had a contract to go install smart meters, and then somebody, I do that kind of contract self work kind of stuff is what I used to do. I did it for hospitals and all kind of stuff, but I had a contract to go around and, change out a meter and put a smart meter in. And then I started hearing all this stuff about smart meters. So I actually took one apart, looked at it. Then I took one and activated it and measured it. Okay. It was broadcasting the ones I had that is broadcasting at 859 megahertz, which is really low, and it really doesn't resonate with anything. And it was broadcasting at 100 milliwatts. Now my home phone, the landline phone I was telling you about earlier, that's at 2.4 gigahertz, that's 4 foot from me, is 250 milliwatts. My meter out back, although I had them remove the smart meter and put back a regular analog meter, is in a metal box, and that is grounded. And I have an RF meter because I use it in my job quite often. Well, not anymore, but I used to use it in my job quite often. And, and I would have to get stupid close to that thing to actually get a reading. And when we still had the smart meter here on the house that I had removed, the truck literally had to come almost all the way to the house. But the only thing I saw about the smart meter when they installed it, the only thing is I started getting all this junk mail about replacing my air conditioner, replacing my refrigerators, replacing my freezers, replacing everything electric in the house.
Weird. That's weird.
So we go back. So it goes back to, it's all about the money, because because I was getting this, when I had the smart meter, I was getting this every month. I was getting this crap from the electric company about my power usage.
Now, you're not worried about the smart meter then, right?
No, I don't. I have no reason to be worried about something that's 150 feet away from me on the back of my garage, inside a actual grounded metal box, putting out 150 milliwatts. That's my opinion on the smart meter. I mean, the wiring in your house operating at 60 hertz, which is actually real close to your brainwaves.
Oh, jeez.
If that's not, if you got a bunch of wiring in your house that's not properly grounded or properly phased, that will cause you a lot more health damage than anything a smart meter will actually do, because it's putting out tons of EMF.
Yeah, but then there's the longitudinal waves that they can't measure yet, that they now understand are propagating alongside the I went blank. The
smart meters?
Yeah, well, there's two different types of waves. There's the scalar waves and the longitudinal waves, and then there are the what are those waves? The Hertzian waves, which is what the meters are able to measure.
I've heard that scalar waves actually can go faster than the speed of light. Is that true?
Yes, and they can penetrate. There's nothing that will block them. That's why there's an experiment on one of my blogs. A German, I think he's an engineer or a scientist, makes his own Faraday cage to show you how he makes it out of cookie tins. And he puts a radio inside and he nests it inside another one, and he shows you how it will block the normal, radio signal, communication signal. And then he generates longitudinal waves. And of course, you don't get the communication where the radio's speaking, but it starts making a static sound. And he's showing how that the scientists know this. They cannot block scalar waves. The Faraday cage will not work. They go right through it. They're so fast.
Well, yeah, the sun puts out its own scalar waves.
Yeah, it's a different. Yes, of course. And if you're in the sun for too long, you'll die. But
yeah, I mean, duh.
These are yeah, but I mean, I've had someone else make this argument. What they don't understand is we are creating a type of longitudinal wave that's detrimental to our health. And because normal meters won't measure it, people don't think it's there, understand about it.
Here's a question. I think it's a fair question. If you can't measure it, how do you know it's there?
Well, you can measure it in a lab. They don't have equipment now to go out in the field to measure it.
Right.
So there's
well, I mean, it's like my house. It was an accident. I live in a really old house built in the 1850s. The way it was originally built to plaster it was they used an iron grate, and all this iron grate protrudes up into the attic. Mm-hmm. So I electrically connected when we came in and rebuilt the house. I electrically connected all of the iron grates coming up off of every room and every part of this house, off of every wall. And then I connected that to the tin roof, and then I grounded that 7 times, 6 foot in the ground with copper. So I live in a Faraday cage.
Cool.
So probably why you can't listen. You cannot listen to a radio station in this house.
Wow.
That's
kind of interesting.
RF does not come through. But anyway, I've just always found this interesting that, you're on the right track, I feel, and I'm not trying to destroy your show or anything or what you're saying, but, it's as somebody that, I was in the radio corps in the Air Force and I'm a ham operator. I just find a lot of the stuff that has to do with this wireless and 5G and smart meters and all that kind of stuff and HARP. HARP started out as one thing and it turned into something else. And I was actually involved in the HARP project. I have just found, I just feel that there is so much mythology that has gotten involved in it that the truth gets lost on the danger of it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
RF is freaking dangerous, but if you want to throw in, but when you start throwing in the aliens and you know what I'm trying to say, when you start throwing all the side stuff in, you lose the truth. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me. I've heard, we were talking about scalar waves. I've heard the next generation of weapons are based on scalar waves. Have either of you guys heard of that?
Yes, of course. Absolutely. In fact, there's a paper that I, when I do presentations at these different shows, that where NASA's discussing, I mean, you know, they understand they're using them for jet propulsion. They are creating scalar wave weapons. And so my advice to you would be to do more research to be able to separate the truth from the fiction. Because aliens or not, I've done a lot of research. I've got a lot of information on my website, which is www.neutrowise.com, that you might want to read, and read my blog, because I'm not just going out there and, you know, I'm vetting my information. This is based on scientific research.
Oh yeah. I hope you weren't taking me wrong in what I was saying. I hope you weren't taking me wrong.
I don't know. Maybe. Possibly.
Well, it's as somebody that has worked in radio his whole life, my whole life. I'm trying to give you another side. I'm not trying to blow you up or anything.
No, I understand where you're coming from, and you know that's also a caveat is when we're in a particular industry that is involved with, whether it's, you know, we work for Google or we are, you know, telecommunications or radio, there's a certain amount of indoctrination that happens also. And so we have to be extra careful to look beyond that and do our research.
Yes. I mean, it's like I said, you know, I was involved in the HARP project, which the HARP project was something that was going on in Alaska. It was created as a means to, during the Cold War, to communicate with submarines under the water without them having to float the buoy. And, you know, we sat, you know, us technicians, we sat in the Sargasso Sea when they did a targeted communication at a submarine that was at 590 meters or something like that. And they sent the communication. The sub got the communication, but during that process, within about 15 minutes, thousands of dead fish floated to the top of the surface.
Wow.
Right.
Unintended consequences, right?
Unintended. Right. So what here's what happened after that. They pulled all the research, shut down the research, and then they weaponized the research.
Exactly. Yes. Yep.
Oh my goodness.
But you can only do that at those low frequencies. You know, you can't do HARP at 2.4 gigahertz. That's the frequency of water. HARP, the way it was designed and invented, is down, you know, where you're screwing with people's heads. That's where it happens. And I can show you a site where you can go look at lower, down at 0 to 30 megahertz or 0 to 30 hertz. And, you know, HARP they shut that site down because they couldn't afford to pay for it anymore. And it's been shut down for, I think, about 5 years now.
So, Nighthawk, do you think that there is something diabolical going on with 5G, or is it just merely
I think
greed?
It's about making money as far as I'm concerned.
And do you think it does have a dangerous aspect to it?
Yes, I do.
So
it's about making money, but, you know, it's still dangerous. It's saturational RF frequencies that are right up there with water that will burn your brain. So, you know, the reason I don't know. Whoever says one way or the other, I might find, I have other reasons to not like 5G, 4G, 3G, 4G, whatever, however it goes. I might have other reasons to not like it, but my reasons to not like it have more to do with the actual aspects and less with the mythology that seems to be going along with this. Not your guess notwithstanding, but just stuff I see on Facebook. People think the 5G it's 5 gigahertz. Well, you can't do 5 gigahertz. That's light.
I have to confess I'm not very knowledgeable on this subject.
Okay, well, just Google radio frequencies.
Sure.
It's easy as that. You'll get the whole radio spectrum. They'll show radio frequency spectrum. When you get up into 5G, 5G is in 5 gigahertz. You're talking about light, and not radio frequencies.
So, what are we going to see, Karrol, with the next? What are they doing now? What's the next step? I mean, are they going to be putting up towers all over the place for 5G or?
Small antennas, smaller antennas so they'll put an array up with lots and lots of little antennas instead of the bigger ones. I mean, you're going to have the bigger ones too. You're going to have both, but really, what they're doing is changing our environment. They've changed. Actually, they've already changed our environment, and because you can't see it, taste it, touch it, smell it. Sometimes you can hear it. I mean, some people hear like what your Nighthawk was talking about. That he had there was an effect from a very strong
the toaster. The
tower.
toaster.
Yeah. Well, I just read an article where they were hearing a humming. It was driving them crazy. This family, and they were asking to please turn it down because they couldn't stand the noise coming from the mobile phone tower.
Wow.
So, they're changing our environment to our detriment. And as I was talking about this town in the UK, Gateshead, the birds are gone. The guy has filmed. Yeah, the birds. You can go on YouTube and see his videos, and I can give you links. He's filming, and there's no bird song. The birds are gone, and it's messing with the bees. It isn't just pesticides and herbicides that are affecting the insects. It's also this. It's affecting all living things, all plants, animals, people.
Well, I could actually verify that. We lost our bees.
Yes.
When they put that tower up, until they turned it down, we just started getting our bees back last year.
Yeah. It's torture to them because of the way they're designed.
What is the benefit of 5G?
Faster downloads.
Money. It's always about the money, dude.
It is about the money.
It's always about the money. They don't care about the damage. They just care about the money.
So it's going to make my download a little faster. I mean, I'm not that, do I really need a faster download that much?
I don't know. Get some dial-up.
I don't know. They want, as people become more and more impatient and, instant gratification, I got to have it now, especially the younger generation. They're convincing them they need faster downloads. And I'm sure they want it for other technologies, medical technologies, I would think, military technologies. They want faster speeds.
It's very weird the way the powers that be are so obsessed with 5G and are in such a hurry to put this in. And I don't see the huge benefit. I mean, so what if I get a little faster download?
Well, one of the things that I realized about it was they keep saying a secure network. So something to consider is that, how, especially, Nighthawk, you were saying you're a ham radio operator. And actually, my son is also a ham radio operator. that you can go on and listen to the emergency responders and hear, police calls and, fire, any kind of emergency response. You can tune in.
Yeah, scanners, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're not going to be able to do that with 5G. It will be a closed system. So we'll only hear what they want us to hear.
Actually, a lot of the now the emergency responders notwithstanding, a lot of the police have moved to trunked. It's where they broadcast on one frequency and they receive on another frequency. I have a trunked radio that I use, to keep you off of it. But there are actual websites out there now that have technology to let you listen to any of that stuff.
Right. Well, but the average, it sounds like.
Yeah, I know. Actually, we got a link to it on our site if you want to go look at Toolbox.
Yeah, that'd be interesting because it sounds to me like the geeks out there are trying to keep up with all the changes, as they try to make it less accessible to the average person. You guys are finding ways of listening anyway.
That's exactly what I'm doing with this station at all times.
Yeah.
I am the geek that tries to keep everybody up.
Yeah, and I think that's important that happens.
If we could get off Skype, it would be great. What are your thoughts on Skype? Not to change.
Well, if we could get off Skype, that would be awesome. But unfortunately, every other alternative
is worse.
Is either worse or have too many buttons to push. I have to run this station to the person that is least technically capable.
Right.
Which is about 70% of the people.
Yeah.
We have tried a whole bunch of different things and nobody will go to it. We've tried Discord, we've tried all these other things, at the moment, Skype's the only available option because it's like push one button.
Yeah. I'm supposed to take this next Skype update and I've been putting it off. I don't want to have it because usually something breaks every time I get a Skype update.
Oh yeah. Every time.
So anyway, how is your company doing, Karrol? Are you able to sell a lot of these little devices?
Yes, it's doing. I've only been in business not even a year, and I had a pretty modest sales goal, but I blew it away in the first month.
Wow.
Yeah, it surprised me, and the response from people, as far as I don't get returns, people really like the products. They feel they've improved their health. They sleep better. Their concentration's better.
What's the product?
Well, as I was explaining earlier, it's.
Well, I tuned in late. Sorry.
No, that's all right. I'm just saying.
I'm just saying that if you got a product to sell, we might be able to help you here at the station if if it's a viable product. So.
Yeah, it's been tested on the human body, both including in vivo cell cultures at the Institute of Molecular Genetics in Bologna, Italy. So they know it works. It's been tested on energy meridians with an EAV machine, acupuncture. It's been tested on actual blood cells. And so what it does is it reduces the oxidative stress by converting. It uses a mineral mixture that vibrates. And when it vibrates, this is my very rudimentary understanding of it, that it creates a field and it draws the longitudinal waves to it and transmutes them into more biocompatible scalar waves or longitudinal waves, whatever you want to call them. They're a pressure wave. And you won't know if anything is effective unless you can test it on the human body. And So that's how this product.
Is it an electronic device or a pill or what?
It's a crystal mixture, a mixture of piezoelectric crystals and patented ceramic powder that is in glass tubes and has an antenna, spiral antenna around it. And it's based on physics. And I'm not a physicist, but I understand it's pretty simple and elegant in its operation. And they can measure how much it reduces by how it affects the body. So, for instance, with a cell phone, one of the little stickers with the mineral powder film inside that you put on your cell phone will reduce the radiation by 67% that comes from your phone. So it doesn't make everything totally safe, but it makes it safer and gives the body a chance to recover. And but of course, avoidance is best. But
it's a convergent transmitter.
It's a what?
A convergent transmitter. It's like
it's like it like polarizes. So,
well, a convergence transmitter is like, okay, so let's just pick a frequency. Okay. Let's call it 800 megahertz. We want to do a convergence transmitter, so the way we break up or jam, a jamming transmitter would probably be the other word that I would use. So if we want to jam a frequency, we put out a frequency or transmit a frequency close to it, but not right on it. Is that what it is?
I don't think it works quite like that. But I do understand what you're saying. I don't know that it works quite like that because I don't know that it jams it. I don't know. I'd have to read more about what you're saying, but I don't think that's exactly how it works because I don't think the frequency is close to it. Although maybe it is because if it vibrates with it, I've done a lot of reading to try to understand exactly how this works.
Karrol, can you type your website again into the little chat here, the Skype chat, because some people are wanting to see it already.
Okay.
And put it in the station chat, please.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not seeing a button to
do. You see that little on the right side?
I see it. Yes. Yeah. Oh, on the right. I see on the left.
Well, maybe it is for you. I don't know, but
it is. It's on the left. Okay. So put it in here. Sure.
Mm-hmm. And I'll give that out too, so people can. And I want to give you my subjective feedback, Karrol, on how it makes me feel. And,
sure.
Okay, it's www.neutrawise.com. Now, I've been using it on and off for a while, and I haven't used it for a couple of weeks for whatever reason. And I put it on today, and I tell you what, it makes me feel like when I was a kid, I had so much energy, I would run around the house screaming. That's the way it makes me feel when it's all working. And if I wear it for a couple, 2 or 3 days, it seems like that kind of wears off. But how does it make you feel? I mean, I feel so focused and so energized. I could probably read 200 pages in this book. You know what I mean? I'm just so intense. Yeah.
Well, what I noticed was before I started wearing the device and I put one in my home, also one of the larger ones, when I would go to write, and I had a discussion with someone just recently who works for Google who said the same thing. I started to lose my language. I would go to write, and it was like it was there, but I couldn't access it. And I mean, my vocabulary seemed to be shrinking.
Wow.
And it was subtle. I mean, it was happening so gradually that I just one day realized what has happened to my vocabulary. It used to be so much better, and accessing words was getting harder than the most rudimentary, it seemed to me. And after I started wearing the device, and this is something I didn't think about that it was going to help with, but when you think about that, how it affects autism is also a disease of where there's communication issues. And I noticed that slowly communication became easier. And that's one thing the developers say about these devices, that as people are exposed to these frequencies, understanding each other is becoming harder and harder. And they also say it's affecting our empathy, which is a big concern to me, that's happening. And so I noticed that I cared more about myself too. I was starting to become kind of apathetic in a very subtle way, to where, I was like, if I didn't feel great, it was like, I thought I felt okay until I started wearing the device. And then I realized, wow, I really felt kind of blah about everything, just very subtly.
Yeah.
I wasn't a zombie, but I was not now I care more about everything. And I feel like I can come up with solutions to things, where I felt kind of things were overwhelming.
Wow.
And I have a friend in the UK who just told me her wireless is in her kitchen. She had a house plant, and it was in there that wasn't really growing. And she sent me a picture on Facebook. In fact, if you look at my page, it's on there, Mark, and it's grown. It's doubled in size in the about 6 months that she's had her home device.
The plant?
The plant is huge. You should see it. And that's not counting all of the positive effects she and her daughter have experienced. And she said her dogs are calmer now.
Now, does she have a bigger one that will help a whole room or whatever?
She does. She has a home device that covers most of her house. And she also, which is a 50-foot radius, spherical. And she also has the pendant like you're wearing and that I wear.
Now, I have to tell people that are listening to the show, I'm not a woo-woo person when it comes to like thinking things like this work. And I wasn't going to give you any slack, Karrol. I mean, but
I remember.
This works.
I do.
I will tell you.
You were very skeptical. I remember. And I said, just try it. That's what, I have a 90-day money back guarantee.
That's
because
awesome.
People should be given a chance to try it and see for themselves. And instead of people returning them, I'm getting more. People order them as gifts for their family. They'll get them for themselves, and then they get them for their spouse, or they get them for their, parent or their children. And, that's one thing I've heard, that parents are just convincing their kids to wear these because they aren't really sexy or cool looking. And this isn't about cool. I see a lot of EMF products out there. I have no idea whether they really work or not, but they're cool looking. And I said, this is really about protection, not being cool.
Have you ever, what's good about having this as a pendant? I have a little thing around my neck, and it's below my heart. But if I move it up to right over my heart, I can't tell you, I can't find the right words, but it feels like it's almost like a relief.
Yeah, I know just what you mean. And it's subtle, but you just do. You feel a relief. And think about it. If the frequencies are causing this stress on us, this low level stress, like water dripping on a stone. Mm-hmm. So people have a hard time understanding, how could this help me? Or they don't even realize they don't feel as great as they used to until one day they're ill.
Yeah.
And it takes years and years of this stress hitting us, and it's cumulative. And so then your body has a chance. That's why I always encourage people, turn your wireless off at night. People in apartment buildings, I feel very sorry for them because, they can't get away from it. But protecting yourself at night is probably the most important time, because that's your regenerative time. And if you can get away from it, turn it off in your own home and sleep without it. And if you can't, get a device. because it helps mitigate 90% of the frequencies in your home. And that's from the power in your walls, as Nighthawk was talking about how dangerous that is.
Yeah.
If your house isn't grounded properly, you don't have to turn off your mains. This works in the near field.
Near field. What's the near field?
Well, I wish I could explain better what that. Every time I read it, I kind of remember for a while.
And then,
it's there's the near field and the far field, and I guess the near field affects us more, and so this works in the near field. And man, if I didn't think I'd be talking about this in depth, or I would.
Yeah, I didn't know we were going to do that either. Tell you.
Yeah, no, that's cool, but I can always talk about the near field more in another.
Yeah, let's
time if you'd like me to.
Well, maybe. Yeah, this is really good. I'm glad we've had this discussion because
it's good.
It can help people.
Yes.
But and I'm going to change the topic just we can come back to the ray guard stuff if we want to. But were you just at Machu Picchu?
I was, yes. I was in Cusco, Peru, and then we took a trip up to Machu Picchu, which was pretty amazing. Pretty amazing place. Now, I didn't feel any metaphysical, there's claims of metaphysical properties there. I didn't sense anything like that. It's just like anywhere else in nature to me. It was, the air was a little thinner. Of course, I live in Colorado, so that wasn't that big a deal once I adjusted. But Cusco's actually higher than Machu Picchu. Most people don't realize that. But just the ruins themselves, the Paleolithic aspect of, just the perfection of, there's the Incan stone, and then there's those perfectly cut, fit together stones that, it's pretty amazing, that level of engineering and how everything was built for earthquakes. So the buildings are wide at the bottom, and even the windows are wide at the bottom, and then they start to slant in, and I guess the angles they're built at in the space were to help withstand earthquakes. This was a long time ago, and
so Machu Picchu, it's in the Andes Mountains in Peru. Peru's in South America, and that's over on the western side by the Pacific Ocean, right? I got my geography right, or am I confused?
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of inland. I would have to look at a map, but okay. I thought it was, maybe it is. I don't know. I thought it was southeast, but I could be wrong.
But the interesting part about this is that when these huge blocks were put together, they did that without the use of mortar, didn't they? And they had some way of fusing, literally fusing these rocks together.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I really wonder how it was all done. And they even had a church in Cusco where they built this big Catholic church over the ruins. You go in, and these ruins are inside the church. And so it's very interesting. There are ruins all over Peru.
And the Incas built this, right? They say.
Well, the rocks, from what I understand, there's the Inca structures, and they look more
normal.
You have mortar, and they're round. A lot of them are round, and then there's these a lot of the guides are saying are pre-Inca structures underneath, and those are what are so intriguing.
And all these ancient sites, and this is my own gist on this. I think tens of thousands of years ago, like the Meier material says, the Great Pyramid's 73,000 years old, and probably some of these extraterrestrial humans had a role in building or guiding the Earth humans how to build this structure where the rocks are. We don't even know how they did this, right? Because the rocks are literally fused together, like they fit together perfectly, and they're not in blocks. They're in these rounded surfaces, right? It's amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing, and the culture there is a mix of the UFO extraterrestrial aspect is huge there, and that's blended with the the spirit,
Kind of a.
the God, the spirit. It's really earth worship. A lot of it. They believe the plants have spirits and that talk to them, and then there's the Catholic Church.
Oh,
and they're all mashed together, and it's like kind of like anything goes. And so, of course, what has sprung up out of this is the and boy, we don't have much time to talk about it, but
I'll have to get you back on here. We're running out of time.
Right, and so I'll just touch briefly on, they are these medicine plant healing retreats, and they're all over Peru, and I'm sure in the other, Brazil and Bolivia, possibly. I don't know what the laws are there, but if they're used as in religious ceremonies, what they consider loose translation of a religious, I don't even know what the religion is. It doesn't seem to matter what your religion is. Just if it's part of your religion, you can partake in this, these, either a San Pedro cactus. That's the one I saw actually advertised the most, or they also call it Wachuma. And the ayahuasca, which wasn't advertised as much, but also if you have an opportunity to do one, you usually have an opportunity to do another.
Well, thanks, Karrol. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you next time. We're done, folks. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.
Bye.